What if the sandwich chain that used to be on every British high street is quietly losing the very customers who made it famous? Before we go any further, 3 quick things. Hit, like if you have ever felt like your Subway order got smaller while the price got bigger. Subscribe, because this channel digs into what is actually happening behind familiar brands, not just what their marketing says. And send this to the one friend who still swears by their usual order, because they need to see this too. There was a time when Subway felt unstoppable in this country. At one point, it had more locations across the UK than McDonald's. That is worth sitting with for a second. A sandwich shop, outlocationing the biggest fast food brand on the planet. Walk down almost any high street in the 2000s or early 2010s and you would find one. You could smell it before you saw it, that warm bread smell drifting out onto the pavement. You would walk in, point through the glass, build your own sandwich exactly the way you wanted it, and walk out with lunch sorted for not very much money at all. For years, £5 got you a foot long, a drink, and a bag of crisps. That was the deal. That was the whole appeal. Something has clearly shifted since then, and it has not gone unnoticed. Across review platforms, social media, and everyday conversation, the tone around Subway UK has changed from casual loyalty to open frustration. People are not quietly drifting away. Many are actively telling other people why they stopped going. That is a different and more serious kind of problem for a brand, and it is worth understanding exactly what changed and why. Let's start with who actually owns Subway now, because it explains a lot of what follows. For more than 60 years, Subway was a family-run business, built by its founders from a single sandwich shop into a global chain. That changed in 2023 when the company was put up for sale, and in August of that year, Subway announced it had agreed to be bought by Roark Capital. Roark is a private equity firm based in Atlanta. The deal was reported at around $9.6 billion and officially closed in April 2024. Roark is not a small player. It manages tens of billions of dollars in assets and specializes in buying franchise businesses. This means chains where individual owners run the actual stores, while a parent company collects fees and royalties from the whole network. Here's the detail that raised real eyebrows at the time. Roark's existing portfolio already included Jimmy John's, a sandwich chain, and one of Subway's direct competitors. That overlap was significant enough that United States regulators, specifically the Federal Trade Commission, formally reviewed the acquisition over competition concerns. They questioned whether one firm should be allowed to own 2 competing sandwich brands at once. The review did not block the deal. It went ahead anyway. But it tells you that even government regulators thought the situation was worth pausing on. Why does ownership structure matter to someone just trying to buy a lunch? Because in a franchise model like this, the parent company's main incentive is royalty income across the whole network, not the day-to-day experience inside any single shop. That pressure tends to travel downward, from the corporate level to individual franchise owners, and from franchise owners to what actually ends up on your plate. It is not a conspiracy. It is simply how that kind of ownership structure tends to behave, and it lines up with a lot of what customers started reporting shortly afterward. One of the clearest examples is the rollout of self-service ordering kiosks. Subway introduced these across the UK starting in 2024, describing them publicly as a way to add convenience for customers and efficiency for franchise teams. By 2025, hundreds of these kiosks were live across the UK and several other countries. The reaction from customers has been mixed at best. Review platforms show a consistent pattern of complaints about screens freezing, orders not registering properly, and what should be a quick lunch stop turning into a slow, frustrating process. More importantly, that original Subway experience, watching your sandwich get built in front of you, point by point, is exactly what many locations have moved away from. Customers and former staff have both described counters being screened off in some stores. This means you place an order on a screen and simply wait for whatever comes out, without the visibility that used to be the entire point of the brand. That loss of visibility connects to another common complaint: portion size. Across review sites, you will find a repeated pattern of customers describing sandwiches that felt noticeably lighter on filling than they remembered. They described footlongs that looked thinner once unwrapped, and cheese and meat portions that felt smaller for the same price. None of this is something a customer can independently verify slice by slice. But when the same specific complaint shows up over and over from unrelated people in unrelated locations, it stops looking like a coincidence. It starts looking like a pattern worth taking seriously. Then there's the menu itself, and specifically what happened to customization. For years, Subway's whole identity rested on one simple idea. You choose everything. Your bread, your protein, your salad, your sauce, built exactly the way you wanted it. There was nobody else on the high street offering that same level of control at that price point. In more recent years, Subway introduced the Subway series, a range of preset, pre-named sandwiches with fixed ingredient combinations. For a lot of longtime customers, This represented a real shift away from the brand's original promise. Reports from customers described more friction around requesting changes to these fixed builds, and some familiar older menu items disappearing altogether. Fully customized orders sometimes cost more than picking from the preset list, for a brand built entirely on customer control. That shift landed hard with the people who valued that control the most. Now let's talk about price, because this is the complaint that comes up more than almost any other. Subway used to be genuinely known as a budget option, the kind of place shift workers and students relied on because it was cheap and filling. That 5-pound foot-long deal is not ancient history for a lot of people watching this. It is living memory. Prices have moved a long way since then. Meal deals that once sat comfortably under a $5 now regularly run into double figures, and premium options can push a single meal considerably higher. For 2 people getting a foot-long and a drink each, it is easy to end up spending significantly more than you would on a proper sit-down meal at a pub. That comparison matters, because Subway was never competing with sit-down restaurants. It was competing with the supermarket meal deal and the value menu at other fast food chains. When the price gap between Subway and a genuinely filling hot meal elsewhere starts to shrink or disappear entirely, the core reason people chose Subway in the first place quietly disappears with it. There is a genuinely interesting legal story tied up in all of this too, and it involves the bread. In 2020, Ireland's Supreme Court ruled on a tax case involving Subway's bread. Specifically, whether it could be legally classified as bread under Irish tax law, where staple foods like bread are exempt from a certain tax. The court found that the sugar content in Subway's bread recipe was too high relative to the weight of the flour to meet the legal definition of bread for that exemption. That ruling applied specifically to Irish tax law and does not mean the bread is unsafe or unusual by normal food standards. Plenty of commercial breads contain added sugar for texture, browning, and shelf life. But it is a genuinely striking fact that a court, in a serious legal proceeding, looked closely at the recipe and concluded it did not meet the traditional definition of bread. That is not a marketing claim or a social media rumor. That is a real judicial finding. It is worth knowing the next time you hear Subway describe its bread as fresh and wholesome. While we are on the topic of health positioning, it is worth being honest about something else. Subway has spent 2 decades marketing itself as the sensible, better-for-you fast food option. And to be fair, a salad-heavy sub with lean protein absolutely can be a reasonably balanced meal, but some of the more indulgent combinations, extra cheese, certain sauces, larger bread portions, carry a meaningfully higher salt and sugar load than the healthy branding might suggest. This is not unique to Subway. Most fast food chains have menu items that stray well outside the healthy category once you add enough extras. The issue is specifically the gap between the marketing and the reality. Subway has leaned harder into a health-conscious image than most of its competitors, which makes that gap feel more notable when customers actually stop to check. Quick pause here. If any part of this is matching your own experience, whether that is a shrinking sandwich, a frustrating kiosk, or a price that made you think twice, drop a comment. Tell us which one hit closest to home. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who are asking the same questions, and it helps us know what to dig into next. There's also a legal quirk in UK tax law that adds an extra layer of frustration, specifically for toasted sandwich lovers. Under UK VAT rules, food that has been heated and is intended to be eaten hot carries a 20% tax charge, while cold food generally does not. This applies directly to toasted subs. In practice, that means asking for your sandwich warm, which for a lot of people is the only way certain fillings are genuinely worth eating, comes with a built-in tax premium. That tax is baked into the price on the board. It is not something Subway invented. It is a broader piece of UK tax law that applies to hot food sold for immediate consumption at plenty of outlets. But it does mean customers face a genuine trade-off. Pay a bit more for a warm sandwich, or eat it cold and miss out on a meaningfully different eating experience. Loyalty is another area where trust has visibly cracked. The original Subway loyalty scheme in the UK was a physical stamp card, something people kept in their wallet, filled up over repeat visits, and eventually redeemed for a free item. It was simple, visible, and it rewarded exactly the kind of repeat customer behavior that builds long-term brand loyalty. That system has since been replaced by a digital rewards app. For a meaningful number of existing customers, that transition did not go smoothly. Complaints on App Store reviews describe old points not transferring across to the new system. In some cases, customers were cut off from redeeming previously earned points earlier than they had been told. For anyone who spent months building up a stamp card, only to watch that value disappear in a system migration, that is not a small inconvenience. That is the kind of experience that turns a loyal customer into a former one, and turns a quiet complaint into a public one. And then there is the menu direction itself in recent years, which has raised some eyebrows, even among people who were not particularly bothered by everything else on this list. Subway has expanded into jacket potatoes, dessert-style footlongs, loaded fries, hash browns, and various snack items. These items sit further and further from the core sandwich identity the brand built its reputation on. Menu expansion is not inherently a bad business decision. Plenty of successful chains diversify their offering over time. But for a lot of longtime customers, watching a sandwich specialist increasingly lean on side dishes and novelty items reads less like confident growth. It reads more like a brand searching for new reasons to bring people back through the door, because the original reason is not pulling the same weight it used to. Put all of these threads together and a clear picture starts to form, without needing to reach for exaggerated claims to make the point. A brand that changed hands to a private equity firm with a direct financial interest in a competing chain. A rollout of self-service technology that customers describe as frustrating rather than convenient. A shift away from the visible, customizable experience that originally set the brand apart. Prices that climbed steadily while portion complaints climbed alongside them. A tax ruling that genuinely questioned whether the bread even qualifies as bread. A loyalty scheme overhaul that left some longtime customers feeling shortchanged. None of that requires inventing a dramatic boycott narrative. The real story, backed by real facts, is arguably more interesting anyway. This is what it looks like when a beloved high street brand quietly drifts away from the things that made people love it in the first place. This happens one small decision at a time, until enough of those decisions add up and customers start voting with their feet. That is really the heart of what is happening here. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to stop going to Subway out of nowhere. It happens gradually. You notice the sandwich feels a little smaller. You notice the total at the till creeping higher. You notice the kiosk taking longer than the person behind the old counter ever did. You notice your stamp card points just vanished one day. On their own, none of those things feel like a big deal. Stacked together over months and years, they add up to something that does feel like a big deal. And that is exactly what seems to be happening across the UK right now. Quick moment before we wrap up, because this next bit matters. If this video changed how you're going to look at your next Subway order, put it in the comments. Or if you have your own story about a stamp card, a kiosk, or a shrinking foot long, tell us. Real experiences like that are worth more than any statistic. They help other people walking into a Subway today know exactly what to expect. So where does that leave Subway UK heading into the rest of 2026? It leaves a brand at a genuine crossroads. It still has thousands of locations across the country and a level of brand recognition that most companies would envy. That is not nothing. But recognition built over decades can erode faster than most people expect once trust starts slipping. Trust is exactly what has been slipping here. The stamp card felt personal. The counter felt transparent. The £5 lunch felt fair. Piece by piece, each of those things has changed. The customers who built this brand's reputation over 20 years are the ones now noticing it the most. None of this means you have to swear off Subway forever. It is not really the point of this video to tell you what to do with your own lunch money. The point is simpler than that. Know what changed, know why it changed, and know that the frustration you might be feeling at the counter is not just in your head. It is showing up in reviews, in complaints, in declining loyalty, and in a genuine documented shift in how this brand operates. From the ownership, at the very top, down to the sandwich in your hand. A high street institution does not disappear overnight. It slips slowly, one small decision at a time, until the people who trusted it the most are the first to notice it is gone. What you decide to do with that information now is entirely up to you.